Next on Book TV, Ben Shapiro argues that over the past 60 years, Hollywood executives, producers, writers, and actors have used the television airwaves to promote their liberal views. This is about 50 minutes.
Well, first of all, thanks so much to the Heritage Foundation for hosting me. It really is an honor and a pleasure. I do consider Heritage to be the foremost organization leading the fight for a restoration of constitutional values in America. And it's a privilege to speak about my book here. Well, let me begin by asking you a question. What's more powerful in shaping our views, narrative or argument? Here's an argument against abortion. This is an argument. By the end of the first trimester, fetuses have brainwaves, they have 5 fingers on each hand, they have a stomach, they have functioning kidneys, they have an operational heart, they have fingerprints. And yet each year, 1.6 million abortions are performed, and 91% of those, 1,456,000 abortions, are performed in the first trimester. Now, here's an anti-abortion narrative. Jane was 16 years old. She got pregnant by her boyfriend, and she was pretty, she was smart, and she knew that having this baby was going to ruin her life. So she started asking her friends, she started asking her family members, and they all encouraged her to go ahead and do it. Prompted by these people, she drove to the abortion clinic. She thought it was no big deal. As she walked into the clinic, something odd happened. Another girl accosted her. She said, "All babies want to be born." Jane ignored her. After all, what did this young woman know? "Your baby has a heart," the girl told her. Jane ignored her again. This is still propaganda, she thought. "Your baby has fingernails." Now, that was odd, right? This shook her. She walked into the abortion clinic and she sat down. She glanced around, and she couldn't help but notice that everybody was playing with their fingernails, right? Tapping them on the tables, chewing on them. And she thought, fingernails. I have a life growing inside me. And she walked out of the abortion clinic, and that was the end of the story. Now, let me ask you this. How many of you remember the statistic that I gave you about a minute and a half ago? Now, how many of you remember what prompted Jane to walk out of the abortion clinic? Everybody remembers the fingernails, right? And I promise you that a week from now, even those of you who actually remembered the statistic, and by the way, it was 1,456,000, those of you who remember that will have forgotten the statistic, and you'll remember the fingernail story. Narrative matters. Conservatives, unfortunately, have abandoned narrative as an emotional tool. We've fallen into the trap of thinking that intellectual argument tends to trump emotion. You hear it on talk radio all the time, right? We have all of the logical arguments. We have all the facts on our side. But, you know, they just rely on emotion all the time. Yeah, well, because it works. We need to start taking that fight back. That's the power of narrative. That narrative, by the way, was from the movie Juno, for those of you who recognized it. Hollywood, which is the chief, foremost political tool of the left, it's totally run by liberals at this point. Liberals who discriminate against conservatives, who scorn traditional American values, and who use television in particular as a tool of propaganda in order to achieve their political ends. They use the narrative to push their point of view. They're very clever about it. They recognize that if they slide their messaging in, it's much more effective than if they simply come out and hit you in the head with a 2x4. And so they create characters that we like and that we want to spend time with. This is the whole principle of television. It has to be well written. It has to be based on character. It has to be based on people who you'd rather spend time with than your own family, which we do, by the way. On average, we're watching 2 to 3 hours of television a night. It's a lot more time than you're actually spending with your children, your spouse, the other people in your family. These characters better be people that you like. So Hollywood does that. And then they have those characters act in ways of which you wouldn't approve. It's a very, very effective methodology. They create a set of friends for us, and then they use the behavior of those new friends to convince us to accept new lifestyle choices, new politics, and new policies. Now, Hollywood didn't used to be this way. In the 1950s and even the early 1960s, Hollywood executives were by and large conservative. Early creators were always liberal. They tended to be Jewish socialists from New York. They were vaudevillians. They were liberal in orientation. The battle between these two groups resulted in a relatively nonpartisan kind of television. There were always flashes of liberalism that shone through if the creators could get away with it on occasion, but for the most part, it was sort of down the middle. With the death of Kennedy, Hollywood's liberal creators became more strident. There was a key shift in kind of liberal thinking in America when Kennedy died. We shifted from a hopeful liberalism, you know, the future was going to be great, we were entering the new frontier, to a very pessimistic liberalism. America is a bad place and must be fundamentally changed. At the same time in television, the executives themselves were beginning to become more liberal. They were being replaced by a new breed of advertising agency executives who largely sprung from the milieu of New York. They were young, they were urban, they were hip, and they were liberal. And so everybody was kind of now pulling in the same political direction. They did have one problem in terms of liberalism on television. The audience was still by and large conservative. In 1965, this was a very conservative country. So television was faced with this great dilemma. How could they program left when the country was right? They came up with a scam. This is what Hollywood is fantastic at. Here's the dirty little secret about TV. The TV creators don't give a damn about you. They could not care less about you. They're not interested in you. They're interested in the advertisers. The advertisers are where they get their cash. When you flip on your TV, no matter what you're watching, you're not paying for it except for your cable fees or your satellite TV fees. You're not paying the creators of the television shows. The advertisers are. The only reason audiences are important in the market is because advertisers use those numbers to push to determine how many people are seeing their message. So TV tells the advertisers, here's how many people are watching the show. Now this is how much you should pay for those sets of eyeballs. But that's not all that TV creators and executives do. They say that certain elements of the TV audience are more important than other elements of the TV audience. Not all eyes are equal. This is why you hear all the time about the 18 to 34 or the 18 to 49 crowd, right? Every time you look at the Nielsen ratings about a particular television show, they say, here's the rating, and here's the real key rating, 18 to 49. Now, if you think about that for half a second, it makes absolutely no sense. Why should people 18 to 49 be the targets of advertisers? By and large, people who are 18 to 34 are living in mom and dad's basement, smoking dope, and being unemployed. I mean, I'm in that age group, okay? A lot of my friends are. So the fact is that people who are 50 and above are the only people in this country right now who have savings, who have disposable income, they're retiring, and now they're spending money. And this is an aging country. It's a baby boomer country, which means that the leading network in terms of revenue is CBS. Now, anybody under the age of 40 here, have you ever watched a CBS show? One? Nobody watches NCIS under the age of 40. Nobody. And yet this is one of the highest rated shows on television because everybody over the age of 50 watches these shows, and CBS rakes in the dough. But the TV executives have scammed the advertisers into believing that none of those people truly matter. So they've lied to the advertisers. Now, why do they lie to the advertisers? Originally speaking, there were three major networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. In the late 1960s, ABC only had affiliates in the major urban areas. They were getting their butts handed to them by CBS, which had affiliates everywhere. Right? It was actually having all of the top shows with Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and Petticoat Junction. Right? Not exactly liberal urban type shows. Now, what happened is that ABC figured, okay, we got to make some money. How are we going to do this? We'll scam the advertisers and tell them that our viewers are more important than their viewers. And because there was a bunch of liberal creators and executives and a bunch of liberal ad agency people, they said, okay, that sounds great. Now, there was an ancillary purpose here. What is, by and large, the most liberal age group in the country? 18 to 34, 18 to 49. And that's why they've been allowed to program liberal, and that's why they lie and they say the market demands our liberalism. Right? This is what shuts down conservatives. This is really what primetime propaganda is different. Everybody who's critiqued TV before has said, yeah, TV's liberal. And then the left says, okay, so TV's liberal. You're asking for it. You don't like it, turn the channel. Only one problem. There's nothing to turn the channel to. The same people control all the channels. And number two, they're not really marketing to you. They don't care about you. Even if we did turn the channel, for the most part, conservatives tend to be older. They tend not to live in urban areas. And therefore, they're not the viewers that they're looking for. The result is that there are no ramifications whatsoever for Hollywood's ever-deepening liberalism. That liberalism comes through your TV on virtually every program you watch, day in, day out, night in, night out. Now, all this information has been put out there before. What's different about primetime propaganda is that I didn't just want to write about the history of TV. I went in and I interviewed all of the people who made TV. I decided to get the story from the horse's mouth. The beautiful fact about liberals, and the question I've been asked a lot is, how did I get these tapes, right? I mean, I'm not exactly a closet conservative. I've been openly conservative since I was 16 years old, and I've had a nationally syndicated column on politics since I was 17 years old. I'm now 27, so there's 10 years worth of records out there about my politics. The beautiful fact about liberals, however, is that they stereotype on a regular basis, especially on the basis of race and ethnicity. So it was no surprise that they figured that I was a liberal when I emailed them. My last name is Shapiro, and I went to Harvard Law School. At least a 98.6% shot I'm a liberal. I told them, by the way, that I was writing a book about the history of television, that I was profiling the biggest names in it, and that I was looking at the changes in social messaging from Dick Van Dyke to Sex and the City. So I told them exactly what the book was about, right? I think they probably stopped listening at profiling the biggest names in TV. Ego kills. All these people wanted to be interviewed because they thought, yes, we are the biggest names in TV. As a subtle reminder of my credentials, I wore my Harvard Law baseball cap to the interviews that I did. I do that on a regular basis, by the way. As you can see, I cover my head. I wear a yarmulke. I have to cover my head for religious reasons, but it served a dual purpose there. None of them Googled me, sure that I had to be one of them. What I found was stunning. A Hollywood community that is not only proud of its liberalism, but believes deeply that what it's doing is right. They are openly discriminatory, and they are happy to use their power to proselytize for liberalism. They work hand in glove with the government here in D.C. to keep pushing liberalism. That happens through subsidies. It happens through back scratching. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. And they twist the market, as I've explained, to achieve their own ends. I'm going to play some of that audio for you now so you can hear it directly from the people that we're talking about. Let's start with Leonard Goldberg. Leonard Goldberg happens to be a political independent. He's producer of Blue Bloods on CBS. He was also producer of Charlie's Angels. He is a member of the board of CBS, and he was Aaron Spelling's old partner. So Aaron Spelling, who made probably half of the major TV shows in the 1980s and 1970s, he was his partner. Goldberg sums it up with regard to Hollywood's politics. Let's see if we can play that now.
And that is one of the criticisms that you hear a lot from cultural right-wingers, that Hollywood is too left, there's too much sexual content, there's one side of the agenda being pushed on a lot of shows.
There's no question about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about the content being pushed, but in terms of the thought about various matters, social and political, it's 100% over. And anyone who denies it is kidding or not telling the truth. I can say that as an independent. There's no question what the agenda is. But if you say, well, let's do a show about this, everyone is on one side.
Do you think that's a barrier to entry for people with different viewpoints in Hollywood?
Absolutely. The late Ron Silver, who was a friend, and he died too young. He started as a Democrat and became a Republican. Brilliant actor. Brilliant. He felt very strongly that his opportunities were limited because of his outspoken feeling about his views. You have to start with the premise. Unquestionably, Hollywood is a liberal community.
So the question is, why is Hollywood so liberal? The answer is obvious. For the most part, they despise conservatives. They live in an echo chamber. Hollywood is like liberal academia writ small. It's so cloistered that everyone feels that they're expressing fact, not opinion. Anything they say is just true. And if you disagree, it's because you are factually incorrect. Take, for example, Susan Harris. Susan Harris is the creator of a couple of the most famous shows of all time, Soap and Golden Girls. Here's what she had to say about conservatives across America. Let's see if we can play that.
And these are the Campbells. And this is Soap.
Mother, how would you like a daughter?
That is Billy Crystal.
Sit down, Ma.
Jody, just tell me.
I'm thinking of having a sex change operation.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again.
Condoms, Rose. Condoms. Calm down, lady. You just get out of prison?
So what's your response to the criticism of people at the moral majority and these kind of groups when they say television's too liberal, it's too progressive, and
idiots talking. I mean, what can I say? It's just, look, there's a large section of this country. It seems to be getting smaller. At least, we put Obama in office, and so people, I think, are gotten a little bit smarter. But there are a lot of people who really have medieval minds in all sorts of ways, who aren't open to anything new, aren't open to anything reasonable, think science is a matter of belief, and that's who you're dealing with.
She's an absolute delight. She actually goes on there and she says that she couldn't write for that audience, right? I mean, she says, this is an audience that I could never speak to. Well, that was exactly the audience that she was speaking to. Those were the people who were watching her show. So why is there this giant disconnect between the creators of television and the people who watch television? Because these people, the people who create television, the same folks who say that imperialism is the worst form of evil in the universe, are the greatest cultural imperialists in world history. And it ain't close. Sometimes it's unconscious, because they think that they're reflecting real-life America when, in fact, they're transforming it. That's actually what Harris told me. She said she thought that TV lagged behind cultural shifts rather than pushing them forward, even though she was behind Soap, which was one of the first network television shows to promote gay rights. The truth is that TV reflects the lives of people in Hollywood, and it transforms everybody else, even when liberals aren't exactly trying to do that. They only reflect what they see in their daily lives, and it comes out in their writing. Sometimes, however, it is active. Listen, for example, to Nicholas Meyer. Nicholas Meyer was the director of Star Trek 2 and 6. He was the writer of Star Trek 4. And he was the director of one of the most successful TV movies of all time, The Day After. The Day After was a movie about what would happen in the aftermath of nuclear war. At the time, it was one of the highest-rated TV movies in the history of the medium. The movie premiered during the 1984 election cycle. Here's what Nick Meyer had to say about what he meant to do with The Day After. Let's see if we can play that.
My private, grandiose notion was that this movie would unseat Ronald Reagan when he ran for re-election.
Well, so much for that. They use their work to convince us of particular goals. And that doesn't stop them from trying even when they fail. Marta Kaufman, who's the creator of Friends, we were going to play this clip, but there was cursing in it. We couldn't bleep it out. Marta Kaufman, who's the creator of Friends, for example, told me about one of her favorite episodes in television, the lesbian wedding episode in the first season of Friends. In that episode, she said, they cast Candace Gingrich, who is Newt's half-sister and is a lesbian, as the pastor of that wedding. She said that she was cast as a quote-unquote F-U to the right. People in Hollywood feel the need to slap us across the face. Some of that springs from guilt. These are very, very rich people, and they're also socialists, so they have to live with themselves. The way they do that is by looking across at America and saying, okay, you're a bunch of capitalists, I know I'm making money off of you, but at least I'm going to smack you across the face every so often and remind you how evil you are. That's why we see so much shock value on TV, by the way. They don't feel good about themselves unless they've just socked somebody in the nose. Now, the response to this is that if we don't like it, we can turn the channel, right? We already talked about this. Only a couple problems with that. First, what do we turn the channel to? The TV industry is wildly vertically integrated. Basically, 6 companies control everything that you see on TV. The same group of players controls the entire industry. Second, they've messed around with the advertising industry, as I told you. Third, they're getting subsidized and sponsored by the federal government. The cozy relationship with the government goes all the way back. Take, for example, the Smothers Brothers. For those of you who are under the age of 50, you're not going to remember the Smothers Brothers, but everybody else is going to remember the Smothers Brothers because it was highly controversial. It got tremendous ratings. It got canceled in, I think it was the 3rd season. Why did it get canceled, even if it had tremendous ratings? Well, let's let Mike Dan, who is one of the VPs over at CBS, explain why that show got canceled.
We would like to do a ballad, my brother and myself, combining our voices as once we did long ago. And you sing a ballad entitled Machaya. What? Machaya.
The thing that finally got them in trouble, of course, was because of the Vietnam situation, and Johnson was pressing Frank Stanton, who was his best friend, and as a result, I was forced to cancel the Smothers Brothers at one point because they were so anti-Vietnam.
You got pressure from Johnson to cancel the Smothers Brothers?
Yes.
Oh, can you tell that story? That's interesting.
That's very interesting. Because Lady Bird you're just being pushing the anti-Vietnam thing too much. And it's very embarrassing to CBS and to me, because I noticed he was supposed to Lady Bird, and it was his pressure and Bailey's pressure to take them off.
That pattern of governmental involvement continues today. It's a lot deeper today, actually. My favorite example springs from, where else? The Obama administration. Do you remember the Henry Louis Gates press conference, where the Cambridge police acted stupidly? Well, do you remember the lead-up to that press conference? None of the networks actually wanted to have Obama on. They gave a lot of kickback. He really wanted to be on network TV during prime time, and they said, we're going to lose a lot of money. His ratings on the networks had been dropping like a stone ever since he'd been elected, because his popularity was dropping, and so coincidentally were his ratings. He went over the heads of the networks, and he went directly to their corporate owners. Okay, he got them to greenlight his primetime program. He went to Bob Iger at Disney, Jeff Immelt at GE, and Les Moonves at CBS rather than the programming heads. All three are financial backers of the Obama administration. Iger was named to Obama's Export Council about a year later. Immelt, of course, is the head of one of the chief beneficiaries of Obama's largesse, GE. And Moonves is the same fellow who once traveled to Cuba to hang out with Fidel Castro. In any case, here's the real dirty part. The networks grudgingly accepted the order from Obama. Coincidentally, about 2 weeks later, the New York Times runs a story about the pharmaceutical industry buying into Obamacare. They bought in because Obama promised to cap their liability at $80 billion over 10 years. Now, buried in that article was a fascinating little tidbit. In order to seal the deal, the pharmaceutical companies had to chip in just a little bit of money, $150 million bucks, to pay for television advertising in favor of Obamacare. By way of comparison, the Obama administration during the entire 2008 election cycle spent $236 million on television commercials. You see how that works? Obama gets what he wants. The industry gets what it wants, television advertising. Everybody goes home happy, except the taxpayers whose airwaves are being used for backdoor propaganda efforts. Now, you'd imagine that the big stopper here would be the executives, right? You'd think that the executives would stop all this liberalism from going forward. Leave aside for a moment their reliance on big government and focus instead on the fact that these people are corporate officers. They're supposed to be focused on earning revenue for the shareholders, correct? Only one problem. The executives want to make a difference. So just listen to Doug Herzog. Doug Herzog is the current head of MTV Networks, which is the parent company of both MTV and Comedy Central. Here's Doug Herzog on his role as the chief executive at MTV Networks.
A lot of people on, for instance, the social right criticize MTV. They say it has a bad effect on children, that it targets teenagers and gets them into drugs and sex and that kind of stuff. How do you balance the need to be socially responsible with the need to create successful programming?
Well, I think, look, I'm not at MTV now and have not been since 1995.
Right.
I think, what we used to say then and is, pretty much what they say now, which is, you're talking to young people every day, and, that responsibility comes with that. We kind of have, superpowers, and, as at least as pertains with young people, and you have to use those superpowers for good, not for evil, because, that kind of influence in the wrong hands could be, a bad thing.
Right.
Look, I think MTV was started by and continues to be run by a group of people that, believes in, rock and roll and entertainment and entertaining people and having fun. But, at the same time, I think they all believe that through the medium of television, they can entertain and also try and, make the world a slightly better place.
What kind of messages in particular do you think that...
I think there's a million of them. I mean, look, some of the classics are, going back to when we started MTV News and some of the things we're doing through MTV News and some of the stories and issues we're tackling, obviously Rock the Vote, and, those kind of campaigns over the years. Look, for me, one of my proudest moments, in terms of my career as a programmer was, Pedro Zamora's story on The Real World, way back when, and bringing, the issue of, sexuality aids to TV.
Even the executives feel the necessity to do something for the world. And by the way, I love how he says that they have superpowers, and if those fell into the wrong hands, it could just be disastrous. And he says that they're doing good with MTV and Comedy Central. How many people really think that MTV and Comedy Central are doing something good for the cultural debate? It isn't just about money to these people. It's about using their tremendous reach and power to promote a message, a liberal message. And what's worse than that is that they use their power to keep conservatives from working in the TV industry. This was perhaps the most stunning admission that I came across in primetime propaganda when I spoke to people. They discriminate against conservatives and they have no problem with it. It's the only area of American life. These are the people who supposedly were going to quash McCarthyism, right? These are the people who are against blacklists. Here's what they have to say when it comes to discriminating against people with whom they disagree politically. Vin de Bono is creator of America's Funniest Home Videos and MacGyver. Here's what he told me when I asked him exactly that question.
One of the critiques that you hear a lot of Hollywood, especially from the cultural right-wingers, is that Hollywood is a leftist town, that everyone in it tends to be liberal, and that only one side of one perspective tends to get told in scripted shows. What do you make of that critique?
Let's think back. Well, I think it's probably accurate, and I'm happy about it. If the accusation is there, I'm okay with it.
Isn't that kind of repulsive? Kind of atrocious? But interestingly enough, when I called up Norman Lear, right, who's the dean of television writers, he's the guy who did All in the Family, he did The Jeffersons, he did virtually every major show of the 1970s. He's also the founder of People for the American Way. He considers himself a First Amendment warrior. I asked him to stand up against such discrimination. He hasn't returned my call twice. It's worse than that. He also refused the calls of The Hollywood Reporter and Variety. In Hollywood, there's a group called the Caucus for Producers, Writers, and Directors. They're a nonpartisan group dedicated to diverse thought in Hollywood. De Bono, the guy who you just heard speaking about how he approves of discrimination, he's a high-ranking member of this caucus. Lear is a co-founder of the caucus. Two major Hollywood conservatives, Lionel Chetwynd, who's the Oscar-nominated writer for The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, he's a multiple Emmy nominee, and Norman Powell, who's the former CBS Entertainment Television head, resigned from the caucus in protest over De Bono's comments. Not only has Lear not said anything, the caucus itself refused to pass an anti-discrimination resolution, claiming, amazingly enough, that they are a nonpartisan organization and therefore cannot come out against discrimination. It's purely Orwellian. They're against partisanship, so they can't stand up against discrimination based on partisanship. But that's how it works in Hollywood. I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't felt it myself. I mean, it was so amazing. When I first started this book, I really believed that discrimination in Hollywood was mostly a myth. I mentioned Leonard Goldberg earlier. When I interviewed him, he and I got along famously. He asked me if I'd write a pilot based on my experiences at Harvard Law School. Now, when a top Hollywood producer asks you to write a pilot, you say yes because there is a lot of money involved. So that's what I did. We went into development. I went out and got an agent. Everything was going swimmingly. I had a terrific meeting with the agent. He said, it's the best meeting I've had in 10 years. Until 3 weeks later, I got a call from him. He said, one of my agents Googled you and found your website. At that point, my stomach kind of goes through the floor. He says, I'm not sure we can represent you because he thinks that your political views will make it impossible for you to get a job in this town. Turns out one of the producers in town had already seen my work, and he had told the agent that he knew who I was and that he'd never work with me. That's how it works in Hollywood. I know scores, hundreds of closet conservatives in Hollywood who will not come out for fear of losing their careers. And they're right, because they would lose their careers. It includes some of the biggest names in the industry, names I won't mention here because it would damage their careers. What can we as motivated conservatives do? First off, we need to take off the blinders and we need to recognize that TV isn't going anywhere. We're going to watch it, we're going to love it, because we love narrative. If we want to take back the culture, we need to stop worrying so much about politics, and we need to start worrying more about how we are going to take back the art of storytelling. Ronald Reagan knew the value of storytelling. That's why his speeches were so beautiful and poetic. Our storytelling doesn't need to be restricted to the political sphere. We need to make art, and we need to make excellent art. That art is not conservatism with an artistic bent. It is art first, and only conservative afterward. There is a difference. People have asked me, do we need a Fox News of entertainment? I always say no. We need a CBS of entertainment that happens to have conservative values. We don't watch entertainment for politics. We watch entertainment in spite of politics. We watch entertainment to be entertained. As conservatives, we need to put our money where our mouths are. We need to start contributing to a new Hollywood. We need to give advertisers an alternative place to put their bucks. We're very good at boycotting, But the advertisers are always going to have to go back to where the eyeballs are, and the eyeballs are in mainstream television. Unless we give them a different place to put their money, they're going to keep putting it where we don't want them to put it. That's why, for example, I've joined up with a 501c3 called Declaration Entertainment to raise money for great entertainment that promotes traditional conservative values. My friend Jeremy Boring, who is closely associated with Gary Sinise, he's down on the border right now filming a movie called The Arroyo, which is a cross between No Country for Old Men and High Noon, and it deals with the illegal immigration crisis. We need more people like Jeremy. We need people like you guys moving out from D.C. and looking to take back the culture. It's a lot of fun. You can do this, and we can do this together. But first we have to recognize the power of storytelling. There's a reason when we uncover caves from prehistoric eras, they have pictures that tell a story. As human beings, we are obsessed with each other, and we are obsessed with stories. That's why God speaks in stories in the Hebrew Bible, why the New Testament uses parables. Abraham Lincoln was raised on two texts pretty much, the Bible and Shakespeare. Both are narrative, and both teach us. We've lost the art. We need it back. We need to learn from the left in order to fight them, and we can do it. We can fight the battle. We need your help, your money, your time, and your talents. Come to Hollywood. Make it a truly open town once again. We have to end the primetime propaganda. Thank you very much.
We will be glad to take questions. I've had two thoughts during this. Number one, you've given me a reason to actually like Lady Bird Johnson. And then I can't imagine recasting CBS's conservative broadcasting service, but I'm sure there are a few around here that would like to do that. We will take questions. We have a mic. If you would be so kind as to identify yourself, we'll start over here, and then Ben will take the rest of them.
Lenore Ostrovsky, you said that in fact, the people who watch these shows that are highly rated are, call them either middle-of-the-roaders or conservative?
Yeah.
Why are they watching and doing good things for the advertisers if they're being offended every step of the way? It doesn't, there's a disconnect between what you said and the reality of advertising, which is you need to actually please people, don't you?
Yeah, and they do please people. If you look at the Hollywood Reporter did a fascinating study where they looked at what conservatives watch and what liberals watch. Liberals tend to watch shows like Breaking Bad and Mad Men. Conservatives tend to watch shows like American Idol and NCIS. We actually watch the top-rated shows. We drive the top-rated shows. Why? Because they're less liberal than the alternative. So NCIS is not, it used to be a more conservative show. Don Belisario, the guy who produces it, is conservative. But it has moved to the left. American Idol is relatively nonpartisan. In certain ways, it's actually a conservative show because there's no affirmative action on American Idol, right? If you have a bad backstory and you suck at singing, you're not making the finals. So we tend to use our remote to the extent that we can, but it's too much to ask conservatives to turn off the TV because we're not going to do it. It's just a fact. And I think that we need to get over the concept that it has to, the fire and brimstone idea, turn off your television or the country's going to go to hell in a handbasket. It just doesn't work because guess what? We like TV. We'll lie about it. We'll say, you know, we'll turn off the TV, then we go home, we kick off our shoes, and we watch Friends. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality, and that's why I'm asking people to get active.
Another question.
Yeah. Oh, I'll go do that.
Hi, I'm General McKnight. I was head of the Signal Corps my last 4 years, and we made a lot of films, particularly in World War II, the training films and so forth.
Why We Fight, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Why We Fight. We also had BD films that said why you don't go out and get the wrong kind of lady in trouble. But my question is, how do you use the patriotism of the military to help reproduce something in Hollywood that existed back when Reagan and some of the other, John Wayne, all those old characters were very conservative.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Jimmy Stewart was a bomber pilot. How do you take, and I've worked with literally thousands of soldiers. I had 30,000 people in one of my commands. They are patriotic. They want to be down the middle. They want to be part of the band of brothers. How do you take the military that are today only 1% of our population and use them correctly without using them as a sop, which is being done by an awful lot of the liberals today?
Well, I mean, I think that, first of all, it would take a game-changing shift in the mentality of Hollywood to do that. I mean, let's put it this way. The last cause that they mobilized for in force, the same way they did for World War II was for the Obama campaign. That's how liberal they are. And I think that the military itself, by the way, has moved away from the idea of using film as a medium. I mean, it used to be that the military itself would be involved in doing this sort of stuff. Now, I mean, now the military is not involved at all, right? I mean, now the military doesn't want any part of it because the military is afraid that the media is going to call them propaganda efforts, right? Although, as I say, we're watching propaganda efforts each and every day. I think that we need more military people going to Hollywood and getting involved because there's one thing, they have one vulnerability. This has shifted since the 1960s and 70s. In the 60s and 70s, these were the people who were spitting on the soldiers coming back. Now, they're not spitting on the soldiers anymore. Now they tend to portray them as victims, right? They're victims of the big bad bureaucracy that's sending them out there to die. That's the typical take. But if you walk into Hollywood in a military uniform, they're afraid of discriminating against people in military uniforms. So I think that is actually a wedge that we can use. We need to get more people who have ex-military service to get involved in the industry. I think we need to take it over from the inside from that perspective.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for coming. Bill Glacken. I wonder if you would comment on higher education and the professors, the curricula in the entertainment field.
I mean, it's the same as the rest of liberal academia, only worse. The people who occupy kind of the screenwriting professoriate positions are very obvious in their politics, and they're very obvious in who they want to promote. It was interesting. Marty Kaplan, who's a professor at USC, right, by the way, I mean, this gives you an idea. USC's film program, its film and TV program, is the Norman Lear film and TV program, right? So, I mean, that tells you kind of where they stand politically. Marty Kaplan, he and I see eye to eye when it comes to the advertisers being bamboozled here. I asked him to review the book, and I asked him to take a look at it. He said, I'll get around to it. They're not really that interested in doing anything except promoting their own liberalism. I think that, look, infiltrating academia is another thing that we have to do, period. I mean, in my first book, Brainwashed, was about this. We need to infiltrate the campuses. We need to take them over. The left has taken over institutions. We've been focused on, look, we're conservatives. We focus on individuals. The left, they're leftists. They focus on institutions. There's only one problem. Institutions are unbelievably powerful. So we've seeded massive institutions, the news media, the entertainment media, the liberal academia. We've seeded all of it to them. And then we're surprised when they start churning out liberals day after day. I mean, we need to start getting involved in institutional takeovers the same way that the left does.
Hi, Justin DeGennaro. I'm an intern here at Heritage. This is more of a philosophical question. Do you think that there is a distinction between propaganda and providing a narrative on social commentary, or are they one and the same? Is the line kind of bled more often than not? What are your feelings on that?
My feelings on that is that it's a book title, and you're right. There is a slight distinction, and there's a fine line between providing social commentary that inadvertently pushes certain messages and using it as a propaganda medium. I think that they do, in many cases, use it consciously and in many cases unconsciously. So the effect is the same on the viewer. I mean, when we watch it, and as I said, they're creating a set of friends. Let's put it this way. The gay rights movement would not be anywhere near as powerful as it was without the television industry actively promoting it. I just saw a poll the other day that showed that a huge number of Americans think that 25% of Americans are gay. Now, the real statistic is 2 to 5%, right? And even that is high end. There's only one area in American life where 25% of the population is gay, and that's on American television, right? So people tend to take what they see on TV for granted. Without Ellen, without Will and Grace, I really doubt that we are where we are in this debate. So yes, it is an active propaganda medium, and it's a passive social messaging medium is probably the best way to put it.
Hi, my name is Della Healy, and I was with ABC when Soap came out. And pardon?
It's your fault.
It's my fault. It's Fred's fault.
Yeah, Fred Pierce?
No, Silverman.
Silverman, I interviewed both of them, yeah.
Right, and the thing was that they were so nervous about it going out that they fed the pilots to the O&Os all before they went out, because they were so scared that it wouldn't be accepted.
And by the way, it wasn't accepted. It was widely boycotted.
It was.
It was so boycotted that it lost money every single season, and ABC kept it on the air anyway.
Yeah, and then we caved.
Yep.
We caved. Now, this is my question. You've already named one, or I think two, organizations that have within them conservative, be they screenwriters or whatever they are. And why is it, and I know of a couple, I mean, I've heard of a couple of others, why is it that they can't all come together and say, look, we're going to have an out-of-the-closet tsunami here, you know, because, and let's do it, and get a hold of it, instead of just hiding and not being brave, like John Schneider and a few others.
Right. You know, it's interesting. We did talk about this. When the book came out, at my book launch party, which was put up by Andrew Breitbart, we had a bunch of Hollywood conservatives who were present there. And one of the people there said, let's do this. Let's have an out-of-the-closet tsunami, right? Let's just show everybody that we're here. You know, we're here, we're conservative, we're proud. And people said, and I think rightfully so, that they're afraid of losing their jobs. The problem is the conservative movement has not provided the infrastructure yet to where there's no risk to it, right? If there were a conservative movie business, if there were people out there who are really funding the conservative film and TV business to the tune of millions of dollars, then there would be a lot less fear. And I think that it's unfortunate reality. But even people who are big names in the industry, I'm talking about like Patricia Heaton, right? She's probably the biggest conservative star in the industry right now. Patricia is the star of The Middle. She's the wife on Everybody Loves Raymond. When I interviewed her originally for this book, I don't feel bad saying this because in the past 3 weeks she's come out and said she was discriminated against in Hollywood. When I interviewed her for the book, she doesn't appear in the book. When I interviewed her for the book, I asked her, is there discrimination in Hollywood against conservatives? She said, I've never felt it. 2 days later, she called me up and she said, you know, Ben, I started asking around, and I found out I've lost 6 specific jobs due to my political affiliation. And I said, okay, well, I'll write that. And she called me back 2 days later. She said, please take me out of the book. I don't want to lose work. That's unfortunately how it tends to work in Hollywood. So let's put it this way. Would it be great if there were that out-of-the-closet tsunami? Yeah, but there would be a lot of people who lose their work, who lose their jobs. It's a social business. They wouldn't get invited to the good parties anymore. And unfortunately, that's how business is done. We need to provide them a haven. We need to show them there's a support network out there for them. They feel like they're out there alone. And to a certain extent, they are, because conservatives are watching liberal TV. So until we build that support structure, they're going to stay in the closet. It really is that simple, unfortunately.
Another question? Down here in front? Yep. Hold on.
You mentioned briefly, Eric Soderstrom, by the way, intern here at Heritage. You mentioned briefly Declaration Entertainment. I was wondering if you could talk a little more about that and what you think its chance of success is.
Well, Declaration was started as an LLC before I got involved. We're converting it over to a 501c3 now. I think after this book, it's been getting a lot of press and it's been making a big difference in town and causing resignations, all that sort of stuff. I think that my whole goal here is to heighten awareness. I think that we'll have a good shot of raising some money and starting to train people and bring people into the industry and providing money for them. I think it's going to take some people with very deep pocketbooks to really get involved here. It doesn't take, by the way, a ton of money to produce a good film. I think this is one of the big misnomers conservatives need to get over. I think they need to get over what are you saying? I'm going to sign a $50 million check to make one movie? No. You can make a really good movie for $100,000, right? The means of production have become so cheap that it doesn't take a whole lot of money to make something good, but it has to be good. It has to be a good script, right? It can't be American Carol. It has to be something that is entertaining first and that is well directed and well. Look, Christopher Nolan's first movie was done on a budget of $5,000 with some of his friends. It's called Following. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. You should get it on Netflix. It's really good. Talent is talent, regardless of how much money you put in. So it's not going to take that much money. All it's going to take is active support from the outside, both monetarily and vocally. We need to make clear to the entertainment industry that we're not going to stand for this anymore, and that if they don't start catering to our needs, that we will shift our money somewhere else.
Hi, my name is Robert Small. I actually work for a federal science agency, which is almost like a mini Hollywood. I work with all PhDs nationally and actually take leave and come here on my breaks because it's a breath of fresh air and helps me keep my sanity. But I was just, and I also, I write on the side. I've written for American Thinker, and I'm trying
I've read your stuff.
to do more.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how has the popularity of, and your book's rather thick, so I'm sure it's probably somewhere in there you deal with it, but how is the popularity of unscripted television? How did that, with the rise of reality TV, how did that change the narrative or the control over the narrative from scripted, and how did it cause any ripples of concern?
They prefer to see it not in political terms. They prefer to see it in production cost terms. It's cheaper to produce. My mom actually makes reality TV shows. She does Business Affairs on Hell's Kitchen, Well, she appreciates it. The truth is that reality TV, they tend to blame the success of reality TV on, oh, well, it's low production cost, we don't have to pay the Writers Guild, right? We don't have to pay a lot of residuals. The truth is, yeah, there's some of that. But I think the popularity of reality TV is almost a direct response to the liberalism of scripted TV. I think that more and more conservatives are interested in watching something like The Apprentice, which has a baseline conservative value to it, or American Idol, as I mentioned before, which has a baseline conservative value to it. At least you know when you watch American Idol that for the most part, nobody's going to smack you across the face with a brick, right? I mean, you know that you're not going to get sucker punched by the left when you watch American Idol, for the most part, although Obama will stick his nose in wherever there's an audience. Reality TV is the new wave. I think the internet is really the answer, by the way. I think the internet is going to kill a lot of this because we actually will have the means of distribution. Again, it's still going to cost money. We want some people. It's so funny on the internet. People tend to think that you can make something that looks like Fox News without spending the money that Fox News spends in order to look like Fox News. It costs the same amount of money regardless of the distribution platform. But if we spend the money, we can use the internet as a distribution platform, right? Netflix is eating everybody's lunch. Right? And there's a reason for that because it's on demand and you don't have to watch the commercials. And I think that model is going to start becoming more and more prevalent. So as the internet takes over, and by the way, people in Hollywood know this and they're scared. As the internet takes over, there's going to be a ground shift, or at least an opportunity for a ground shift in the politics of Hollywood. And I think we need to take advantage of that right now at the early inception point because otherwise they're going to take over that medium the same way that they've taken over all the others.
One final question.
Milliken, AM Media. What more can you say about the transformation of David Mamet? And do you know if he may do anything in television in the future?
David's transformation has been very cool to watch from the outside. I helped plan a party for him about a week and a half ago. But he's, it's incredible. It's good to see it happen. I would like to see him stand up along with the rest of us against discrimination in the business because I'm sure that now that he's done this, he's going to lose a lot of friends. I would prefer to see him talk a little bit more about Hollywood and a little bit less about conservative ideals in general, simply because I think that he's new to the game. Which is, just in my opinion, I'm not very much of the Dick Morris school of thought. You're new to the game and now you get to preach to the rest of us. Honestly, I've been here for 10 years, and I've been here longer than that. I'm only 27 years old. I was a conservative from inception. I've been studying this stuff for a long time. If you're newly converted, I don't think that you ought to be up on the soapbox. But for David Mamet to be doing that is a brave and courageous thing. And I think that I would love to see David Mamet get involved with a campaign to really end discrimination in Hollywood because it used to be a First Amendment town. It can be a First Amendment town again. It's going to take look, he has weight in the industry. That's why his book's doing so well. He has weight. And people know that he has weight. If he leveraged that weight to actually change Hollywood, can you imagine the effect? It would be phenomenal. We need more heavyweight conservatives. Joel Surnow, Patricia Heaton, we need all of them. Kelsey Grammer, we need them all to get active. Bruckheimer, Belisario, there are some out there. There are individual cases. I pretty much just named every conservative in Hollywood. But they need to start leveraging their weight and their power to really start making a difference, I think.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much.